Greetings and welcome, everyone. This is the Angry Chicken. I am Garrett, here as always with Jocelyn, but also with a guest. Ridiculous Hat is here because we are talking about the two nerfs to standard, slash wild cards that happened in the 18.4 patch. And so coming, or here, depending on when you listen to this, in 18.4 is a nerf to both Tortollan Pilgrim and Guardian Animals. And so Hat, it's come up multiple, I think it's come up like every time you've been on the show. We've made some mention to Tortollan Pilgrim or Guardian Animals, and certainly there's been a lot of talk about both Turtle Mage and... Well, I feel like people calmed down on Druid. There was like a lot of like Druid screaming, I think, within the first 48 hours of Skullomance hitting the scene. But it's not like Druid's gone away, because like the last time you were on, folks should definitely go listen to that episode. We had this nice back and forth about how everyone's personal ladder experience in Hearthstone varies wildly. But there is one thing, Hat. There is one thing I feel comfortable stating, and it's that most people probably don't run into an abundance of Turtle Mage on ladder.
I think that's correct. Well, I mean, statistically, it's correct. We can see HS Replay and Vicious Syndicate make it very clear. Most people are not running into Turtle Mage at a lot of levels of the ladder. It varies between 1 and 2% of the experience, which means out of 100 games you play, at some MMRs, it's going to be, you'll see one of them. At higher MMRs, I think you're more likely to see maybe 2 of them every 50 games or so. Right.
That's which is not very much.
No. But also, I had an interesting Twitter conversation where it was in response to that play rate, that 2% play rate. And a friend of mine responded with, I just run Living Dragon Breath because I never have to worry about it. And so if you're teching a 3-mana 3/4 with no text in every other matchup to beat a deck that you see 1 out of every 50 games, you are explaining why there's a nerf. Because it feels so bad to experience that it needed to be changed. Now, Hearthstone Twitter has had some different takes today on this subject. I think if you are dialed into the high level competitive scene, you'll get a very different picture of the Turtle Mage nerf. Because I'm going to open some old wounds here. For those of you that were playing back in the day, back in a set called Journey to Ungoro, Quest Rogue, anyone that liked Quest Rogue is upset about the Turtle Mage nerf today.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand that Turtle Mage is not necessarily easy to pilot, but it very much felt like you were just playing your own game and you didn't really care what your opponent did. Like, there was not that level of interactivity that we tend to like in our Hearthstone games and that the devs tend to try to design. So I completely understand where this nerf came from, and I think it was warranted because the way that deck worked was just crazy. But it definitely scratched that same sort of itch as old Quest Rogue and a couple of other decks that we've seen in the past. There was that Warlock deck, the Mechathoon Warlock deck, that kind of felt the same way, where you just kind of wanted to play out your cards, get to your end game as fast as possible, do the thing. And I think that even a deck like that, like the old original Quest Rogue or like that Warlock deck, the difference even between them and Tortollan Pilgrim or Turtle Mage is that they still kind of had a win condition. And sometimes it felt like Turtle Mage, their win condition was just like turtle, like just don't die, just, keep the heals going and there's nothing your opponent can really do. And they did absolutely have a mechanic in there to get that damage in eventually, but we were talking like 15 to 20 turns of turtles, and it was just, oh my God, so annoying to play through.
Yeah,
it's like you knew you were gonna lose, but yeah.
I would like to butt in here in the spirit of being audio friendly, because we haven't actually said what the hell the Tortollan Pilgrim change is.
Oh yeah,
that's true. That's true.
The way that it's getting nerfed is that the old way it used to work is that it read Battle Cry, discover a copy of a spell in your deck and cast it with random targets. The new way it's going to work is Battle Cry, discover a spell in your deck and cast it with random targets. So not discover a copy.
You
Yes.
yoink it out of the deck. So we should explain the mechanism, I suppose. Well, if you've never seen this, first of all, you're somewhat fortunate. Tortollan, Pilgrim, and Potion of Illusion. Potion of Illusion, it looks at your board and makes 1 mana, 1/1 copies of all the things on your board in your hand. So you play Pilgrim on an empty board, play the Potion of Illusion, the copy out of your deck. It would see the Pilgrim and give you a 1 mana, 1/1 Pilgrim. You'd play the 1 mana, 1/1 Pilgrim. You'd go get another potion. It copies both turtles. Now you have 2 1/1 turtles. Then you play the third turtle. You get a Frost Nova. You freeze your opponent's board. Then you play the fourth turtle. You play a potion. You get 4 more turtles. And so it's just turtles all the way down. It's just endless turtles all the way. And so your opponent would be frozen every single turn. And eventually you would be able to kill them by copying. If you played Iceberry, you could play Cloud Prince. And otherwise you could hold Blizzard and play Sun Reaver War Mage and dome your opponent out. But to Joss's point, I was editing show notes for a different podcast last week, and I was multitasking. I was playing Game on Ladder, and I came against Turtle Mage, and I said, you know what? I've got other things I have to do. I'm going to protect other players on Ladder. I'm going to make them play it out. I'm going to make them play it out.
No conceding here.
No conceding. It took them 28
where
minutes to kill me.
can people donate to your PayPal because you are a hero?
It's as long as Blizzard has done it by giving us this nerf. They have done it. But it was 28 minutes for one game. And it was just my board was frozen every turn. And
so 28 minutes of you doing absolutely nothing.
I hero powered.
Well, then.
Yeah. But I played my turns quick, too. It's not like I was roping. I wasn't trying to punish the other person.
So you weren't being you weren't griefing.
No. At least I don't think I was.
I mean, I think a Turtle Mage player might argue that by playing the game out, you're griefing. But it's not like you were taking extraneously long turns on purpose.
Yeah, they chose to play that deck. And they did that to themselves.
With all the players I've talked to that have really enjoyed Turtle Mage, they understand this is part of the territory. There's no one that's like, you should just let me win. It's like, no, they know they're going to be long games sometimes. And the deck has some positive aspects. It is a low variance, high skill, combo-based deck that feels like a puzzle. There's real value in that, especially at very high-level competitive players who are in many cases upset that the deck was removed from the game because it's not really competitive in balance. It's powerful in competitive play. It's a good part of a healthy tournament meta, but nothing about the deck is healthy for how people interact with the Hearthstone client. You're supposed to be able to attack. You're supposed to play spells twice a game, and that's it. You can find some more, but you're not supposed to just chain the copies over and over again. It's so far outside of what was intended and what effects are in the game that it needed to be corrected.
Absolutely. The one thing that I'm a little bit sad about here with this nerf and with this deck being gone is I really liked the design of the weapon, the Sphere of Sapience, I think it was called. And so the fact that this deck now doesn't exist, there isn't really anyone making use of this. And that weapon design was so unique and so interesting. And it enabled this deck absolutely because you were able to essentially bury those copies so that you knew as long as you didn't hit the bottom of your deck, you were going to be able to copy those minions over and over and over every turn. And that led to some really interesting like weapon hate. And you're right, in the tournament meta, it created a really, really interesting back and forth between players in terms of what tech cards they were putting in, you know, what they valued, what they were targeting. Like the tournament meta was interesting, although when a Turtle Mage actually made it through, I was like, oh man, well, this round's going to go 18 hours.
and it was not, how do I say this? It was not the most camera friendly deck in the world.
No.
In particular, when the casters talk about how they don't like casting it and it's not like a priest mirror, it's not random generation, just the same thing over and over again where they, you know, the casters have to vamp for a little bit and they're good at vamping. But there's just something about the experience that feels not very much like Hearthstone. Yeah. And so I understand the appeal of the puzzle mode combo deck, and I think that's cool. And I hope that Blizzard finds other ways to do this that don't involve deleting the attack step from a game that it's in. But this particular execution of the mechanism of how the combo went, just needed to go. It just wasn't the right fit for Hearthstone.
It's an interesting argument, like in favor of randomness, right? Like because we've had spell generation beyond how many copies of a spell you're supposed to play in the past, and that still exists. But a lot of times it's through random generation, discovering spells and whatnot. But this is like so specific and can just target the same very specific spells so many times that I think that's where it kind of breaks like what you're talking about, Hat, which is like what is intended, like there's a lot of places where you can bend the rules of how we understand how many cards can go into a Hearthstone deck, right? But this seems to just go up too far with that.
Yeah, if Shutterwalk combo, instead of having Life Drinker, just froze your board all the time, I don't think that would have gone over well. I don't remember it going over all that well the first time, though after they fixed the animations, it was improved.
People still did not like Shutterwalk.
That is a questionable example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even when you had the glacial shards built into the Shutterwalk and they could freeze, like maybe half your board, even then people were complaining. So, yeah.
And I think that matches what we're seeing here is that this nerf, it reflects Team 5's current design philosophy of this was an error that creates a deck that is just not a great play experience at most levels of the ladder. And it's not just about competitive. There's still plenty of other competitive decks to play. And I understand that there are players that were really invested in this archetype, but you don't need Turtle Mage to be in the meta for the meta to be good. And this mechanic being in the game is ultimately a net negative. Because the first time anyone experiences playing against it, they're just going to say, what happened and why couldn't I do anything? And why is my lunch break over? That was one game.
Yeah.
It checks too many of the concern boxes.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad it's gone, and I'm glad that Blizzard acted quickly on it.
Yeah. Well, let's go to the complete opposite of the ladder representation spectrum and talk about Druid, because Guardian Animals is going up in cost by 1 mana. It's going from 7 mana up to 8 mana. This, again, a card that I haven't seen as much complaint about as I did in the first week of Scholomance launch, but a card that exists in an archetype that has abundant representation on ladder.
Yeah. What's the earliest either of you have been Guardian Animals? I got turn 2 this week.
Oh, I've never been 2'd. I was going to say probably 3 to 4.
I think I got 2'd in the first week of Scholomance.
Oh.
Yeah. It was turn 1 Nature Studies, turn 2 coin, natural lightning bloom, generated lightning bloom, Guardian Animals. Not saying that's representative of the experience. Not saying that's
that's a
why
super high roll.
it was. And really, so Garrett, to your point, how much chatter about Standard have you heard, period, in the past recent little bit?
A lot of hype has been around Battlegrounds because it seemed like something was coming. If nothing else, people were spending a lot of time putting their thinking hat on with the rank reset coming. But outside of that, a lot of it, at least in my circles, happens more around the competitive side of things. And also, I feel people reach out to me with things that are in my sphere of opinion. So usually I hear a lot about people's opinions on Priest, for example.
Yeah. Well, and I feel confident those opinions will continue as long as it is as Priest is a class in the game. But really, just to reflect what you said, I agree that there's less chatter about Druid because I think there's less chatter about Standard. The expansion has been out just under 2 months. Druid was the defining deck since before the set came out. If you went and watched Pheno's theory crafting stream where he was talking about how Guardian Animals Druid was going to be the highest win rate deck of all time, didn't end up being true, but it was flashy and powerful, and the Kael'thas turns were crazy back then before he was nerfed.
It was still impactful on a level that I think reaches kind of the pomp and circumstance of a statement like that.
Yeah, exactly. It was showy and it was strong and we knew it was going to be good and it was good, and now people have learned to keep up with it. But if you're going to change something 2 months in, it's going to be the thing that defined the format starting in day one, and it will get people talking about Standard again. And Guardian Animals was, you could probably leave it and the meta would be fine, but every single deck was built of, how do I deal with the Lake Thresher on turn 4? How do I deal with the Twilight Runner? Devolving Missile is good because it hits this stealth Twilight Runner, whatever. You can Blade Storm. Now it's going to be slower enough that it impacts Druids both offense and defense, because Guardian Animals kind of did both, right? And I've heard some people saying that 7 mana to 8 mana is not a huge nerf because of Druid's ramp. And I ask those same people, how many times have you lost to a Guardian or to a Cult Neophyte on your Guardian Animals turn? How many times have you lost because you had to pay 1 more mana and you couldn't? Well, now that happens every game. And you can kind of catch up with Innervate where you couldn't before. It's not exactly the same, but 7 to 8 1 mana nerfs are enormous. And for people that haven't seen them before, it dramatically changes how decks play out. Like, it's a really, really big deal.
Yeah, and this is the type of change that I look at, and it's not like we got a developer note that said this is the reason why we're changing it, but this is the type of change that I look at and that falls for me very strongly in that feel section. Right, because we bring it up. I feel like every time you're on the freaking show, we talk about that balance changes are made for lots of reasons, but one of the considerations is how it feels to play against that card, against that deck, against that archetype, against that class. And so you kind of already hit all the nails on the head, but I just want to like really shine a light on it, which is like you can win against Druid, yes. But there's still that possibility that this comes out way too soon. And like, if that is still a vast majority of the conversations and concerns being levied against this, against Druid, like that's all about how soon this happened. People aren't necessarily, I'm sure some people are mad that this card just existed and does what it does, right? But they're not mad about
people are mad about things.
Like, yes, yeah. But I like, again, to speak generally, I don't think most people are mad that that Guardian Animals like has the effect that it has. It's that this effect is happening as early as it can. And so if the entire conversation of concerns is being had around how early in a game of Hearthstone this effect can deploy, you've delayed it by one turn or by one more mana ramping card.
Yeah, well, and we can kind of confirm your theory because how many complaints have you gotten about Guardian Animals in Hunter? Because it is a dual class card, which is easy to forget because...
0.
Yeah, exactly. We do actually have some developer tweets too. I asked, Alec likes to tweet after patch notes, and he tweets awesome things. And I asked him, can you please put them in the patch notes? Because I think it'd be great to have it there. But the quote here is, there were some decks that punished Druid for taking too long to get things going, as well as decks that could deal with the big Guardian Animals turn efficiently. Even today, you could say GA is in a fine spot balance-wise. It's strong, but not out of bounds. Our change here is more focused on pushing out the big swing by a turn to alleviate some of the negative feelings when you're on the opposing end. Guardian Animals can be a knockout punch. We like that to occur a bit later. Garrett, you didn't even know what he said, and you were right.
I missed that. In your
heart of hearts.
I was too busy chasing down Korra explanations of certain Battlegrounds things.
Yes. You didn't even need to hear it. You knew.
Oh,
it's
look
okay.
At me. Look at me.
Yes.
This is not a bit, by the way. I actually legitimately did not see that Alec Dawson tweet.
Yes.
Which I should know better. I should know better by now than to do anything other than have a second tab open with Alec Dawson's Twitter account whenever there's patch notes.
I have a developer column on my tweet deck. Just to stay up to date.
Nice. It's an electric near. So right now I just have literally, it's called Shit I Want to See column. That's what I have.
Good call on that. Like I said, I want to be your social media Padawan. I have to learn these things.
Again, as I replied to you when we were talking about that, you already know what you need to do.
That's true.
You know.
Yes.
You know.
But yeah, so I guess the question here is, how will standard change? And I think it'll be the Turtle Mage nerf. I think will be largely insignificant unless you're really looking at pushing high legend ranks, because again, the play rate's just too low. The Druid nerf's going to be a big deal. I think a pretty big deal. And so you think about what liked to play against Druid. Anyone that didn't see them play Overgrowth on 4, but also Paladins kind of liked playing against Druid a bit. Warriors kind of liked it. And then who didn't like playing against it is your Mages and your Demon Hunters. Soul Demon Hunter is going to be, I'm sorry, Josh, you're going to see a lot of it.
Oh, man.
It's going to be a thing because the worst matchups
why did they have to get healing?
Yeah, but at least they don't ultra us anymore.
I guess. Just trading one for another.
The interesting thing is I'm not sure. Well, you know what? So I was about to say I'm not sure my anxieties around running into them with my Face Hunter deck are alleviated, but there totally have been games where it's like if I just had one more turn, I would have had him. So
yeah, and that's kind of the thing is that you think about all those times, because I've had that same thought so many times against Druid. Just one more turn. How could they have it right now? You get one more turn. Now, they can still overflow you, and that can still feel kind of rough, and they can overflow into GA. But the ability to ramp into a board clear that's also a threat is really heavily alleviated now. And I think that even if Guardian Animal still sees play, it's going to be a little bit easier to go wider on the board. Like some decks that had fallen out of favor, like Stealth Rogue, I think will have a little bit more opportunity to come out and play. And if there are more paladins because there are more demon hunters and paladins beat the demon hunters, then you blackjack stunner on the paladin cards. You can see there's so many moving pieces here. And so in order to keep this brief, I think this will be a lot of ripples in the pond are going to happen from this.
Well, rad. I don't think you could put it any better than that, Hat. So, well, thank you so much, dude, for coming on and sharing your knowledge with us. You're just so tapped into this. So we're glad whenever you can come and join us to talk constructed Hearthstone. So if anyone out there is unaware of where they can find you and all of the content that you create, because if anyone out there thinks I maybe make too many Blizzard podcasts, you probably make too many Hearthstone podcasts.
Yeah, but then you keep asking me to be on yours. Are you part of the problem? Is it a problem?
But you're a solution to my problem.
Okay. I'm glad to be here for you, buddy. Yes. So I'm holding up air quotes. My content is chiefly Twitter posts, which is, questionable value, but twitter.com/ridiculoushat. I'm also on CoinConcede over at coinconcede.com. That's a podcast about bridging the gap from casual to competitive, making the competitive scene more accessible to you. And then I also do the Vicious Syndicate Data Reaper podcast. If you want to hear about Standard from a statistical standpoint, that is the place to go. It's a week-by-week rundown, and I imagine we'll have a very fun episode this week looking at the early impressions of the post-patch meta. Yeah.
You make some awesome stuff. So everyone definitely go and check that out. And I think it's going to bring us to the end of this talk. So please don't forget to like, subscribe, ring the bell, leave a comment below. What do you think about everything that's happening? Are you a Turtle Mage? I definitely want to hear from you. Because as Hat pointed out, we don't really hear from Turtle Mages all that often. And I have a feeling I probably don't need to beg too much for a Druid player to leave their thoughts below or write into tacpodcast@gmail.com. So let us know how this plays out for you. Feel free to come back or write an email later on down the line when you've had a little bit more time with these changes. We like to hear how changes like this are affecting players out in the real world. Other than that, if you want to support the show, patreon.com/TAC is the place to do so. We really appreciate all the support from our lovely patrons over there, and you'll get yourself some perks like access to our Discord and an ad-free version of the podcast for your trouble. So go check that out. But for now, from me, from Joss, from Ridiculous Hat, job's done.
Job's done.
Job's done.